Shabbat Shalom. It's so nice to have members of our brotherhood leading parts of the Tefillot this Shabbat, on this brotherhood Shabbat, and also this Shabbat where we are raising awareness about anti-Semitism. You had asked me 10 years ago, would this even be on the top 20 list of things for me as a rabbi to be thinking about or concerned about? I would have looked at you quizzically and said, no, this is not something that we need to deal with. And incredibly, over the last 10 years, we've seen this scourge of anti-Semitism return. The world's oldest hatred has returned, even in our great country, to extents we couldn't have imagined, with actual attacks on Jews, synagogues, hate that has raised its ugly head in all kinds of areas, including social media, and a kind of willingness to engage in this hatred in a way that I couldn't have imagined. Now, Temple Emunah has done many, many great things for many, many different projects, and we start many, many different organizations. I'll pick out one. Where's Hal and Judith Himber, Hal Miller Jacobs, Judith Himber, and I, right, who created a Evera Kadisha, a burial society now with its president, Barbara Neustadt, and many members of our shul. One of many projects that started here at Temple Emunah and is a benefit of the entire community. Our newest endeavor, if you will, is led by Fran Jacobs from our shul and many others. It is really the first ever of its kind in the world, as far as I know, of a grassroots organization to combat anti-Semitism that brings members of different faiths together. And it's an amazing thing that we have this. It is being supported by other organizations because they want to see it as a model that can be replicated elsewhere in the country to help support the Jewish community and to call attention to hatred that has always been there, but sometimes becomes much more activated. So I want to give a lot of thanks to all those who've been involved with Lexington United Against Anti-Semitism, the projects, the speakers, the works that they've been doing, and especially its Temple Emunah member and leader, Fran Jacobs, who I can't thank enough for your leadership. I'm turning it over to you and to introduce our speaker.
Shabbat Shalom. Steve and Evera and I co-chair LUA, Lexington United Against Anti-Semitism. I'll just tell you a little bit about LUA, but we have a spanking new, gorgeous website, and so you can go there for whatever details you're missing. LUA is an interfaith, cross-community, grassroots, volunteer, independent organization dedicated to combating anti-Semitism. With over 200 members, we represent a broad array of religious, public, and private community entities and unaffiliated individuals as well. We are organized into 3 topical subcommittees: community education, community action, and Christian reflection. Although our primary focus is anti-Semitism, we intend our work to amplify and extend ongoing local activities to combat racism, anti-LGBTQ+ hatred, and other forms of religious, cultural, and social bigotry. Please go to our website, you can find out the particulars. That I, and most of you, I suspect, are particularly concerned about anti-Semitism is not a surprise. That's not the story here. I'm not the story here, and that's not the story here. But that we have neighbors, a core group of non-Jews who have chosen this cause among many worthy causes and joined us. Now that's the story. Steve and his pastor at Pilgrim Church, Reverend Rebi Kavish Goresh, who's currently on sabbatical, jumped in at LUA's inception, which was April 2023, to help organize, animate, and lead LUA. We'll hear a bit about Steve's path to this work, his vision of what can be done and how in a minute. But first, I want to say kudos to you all. Temple Emunah played a pivotal role in launching LUA, which is now an independent entity. But during the pandemic, the Adult Education Committee, with leadership from Terry Schwartz-Russell and Sandy Goldstein, designed and implemented a year of study about anti-Semitism. In the second year, we concluded the obvious, that we couldn't solve this problem by ourselves and not wholly by study either. And in her fearless way, Terry invited Professor Reverend Daniel Joslin Siemiatkowski of Boston College to speak to an interfaith audience in Emunah on how Christian practice contributes to anti-Semitism and what could be done about that. Thanks to the Phyllis Klein Throat Memorial Fund that supported that evening, there was a good dinner and wonderful conversation. The swell of great interest in continuing eventually became. To this day, Emunah members have been active in Lua, attending and staffing meetings and events and providing all kinds of guidance and support. I'm just going to name people who are in my head, but I'm sure I'm going to be missing people. I'll mention Tracy Wright, Marcy Lidman, Ken Bruss, Steve Cotrano, and Judy Cantor, but there are many others. Rabbi Lerner has been guide, chief cook, and bottle washer. Lina, Arlene, and the temple board, and of course, Rabbi Tal have all helped in new ways. The Combined Jewish Philanthropies Center for Combating Anti-Semitism has thankfully supported a portion of our administrative work. All of our activities are interfaith in the sense that all are invited to engage in all aspects of our operation, and we favor projects that members across affiliations can participate in. Now, the Christian Reflection Subcommittee, which is chaired by Steve, and still open to everyone, but it has sketched out a slightly different path to achieving the results we are after. It works internally on Christian practice, assuming that since Christians have a special responsibility for anti-Semitism, they also have a special obligation to ameliorate. As Steve's friend Jim Carroll noted about this particular subcommittee's work in a letter he wrote to supporting Lua, he said, you know, at its core, anti-Semitism is a Christian problem, not a Jewish problem. So how it gets solved also has to sit to some large degree with, as a result of Christian work. For example, over the past year, the subcommittee wrote a practical toolkit available on our website for churches wishing to amend anti-Jewish Christian liturgy, curricula, church iconography, and so forth. An educational video series on Christian anti-Semitism is in the works as well. And you can talk with Steve about that later. This is brave. I've observed that this is brave, often lonely, and difficult work. No group, including us as Americans and Jews too, wants to learn about and own up to the historic wrongdoings it has committed, and the wrongdoings that it is still unwittingly committing. However, Steve believes, and you'll hear from him, that this Christian truth-telling is morally necessary and ultimately healthy for all parties. Hard and hopeful words. Let me tell you a bit about Steve. He is a professor of political science emeritus at MIT, where from 1991 through till 2023, he taught courses, wrote extensively, and consulted on U.S. foreign policy, national security policy, and grand strategy, and on the causes and resolution and prevention of war and armed conflicts across the globe, including the Arab-Israeli conflict. Steve, the father of 3 daughters, has lived in Lexington since 1997. We are very lucky that he shares our zip code, and is an active member of Pilgrim Congregational Church, where he has served in multiple leadership roles. And now I welcome my friend, Steve Van Evera.
Thank you, Fran. Thanks, everybody, for coming. Today, in my little briefing, I'm going to describe, it was advertised as a talk on preventing anti-Semitism. I want to focus specifically on what Lua is doing about it, and one piece of 4 big action plans that we have. As Fran mentioned, we've got a plan for community engagement, we've got Christian engagement, we've got public education. I'm going to describe half of the Christian Reflection project. There's 2 projects, as Fran said, that involve Christians. One is to audit the practices of churches and create a tool, actually, so the churches can audit their practices, looking for anti-Semitic, shall we say, framings, echoes, failures to deal with poisonous scripture, ways in which Christian practice ought to be reformed, sort of take the anti-Semitism out of it. And we've already done, as Fran mentioned, a toolkit for pastors want to join that effort for how they might easily think about changing their practice, especially over things like Holy Week, which has been a particularly disastrous time, but also in general about the way Christians preach, the way they frame, the large framing of Christianity, which includes often this supersessionist idea and so forth, what to do about that, and what to do about the poisonous scriptures. How do you talk to your congregations about them? Should you? We believe you should. And how do you sort of decommission them? The other half, though, that I wanted to summarize for you, and I want to ask you all if it makes any sense, too, because it's a brand new thing we're doing. Here's what we're doing. Does it make sense? I'd love to hear feedback from you. Is to create a tool or tools for Christian education on Christian anti-Semitism. Not about anti-Semitism. It's about Christian anti-Semitism. Why are we doing it? Are we doing it right? I'd love to know what you think. It's actually kind of a wild and crazy new idea. The notion that learning about your institution's wrongdoings can help improve your behavior has not been a traditional part of peace work. It's not, something that Kant and Rousseau and people who thought about war in the past, like Thucydides, they never talked about historical memory and specifically memory of one's own wrongdoings and one's future conduct. But the lessons we have since World War II show that this is a very powerful instrument. It actually makes a huge difference. And to some extent, what we're doing is borrowing from the European example and saying, why not apply it to religions? Why not apply it specifically to Christianity? And when I say the European example, there's a miracle that's happened in Europe, which we don't get enough notice, which is war has become unthinkable among the major powers of Europe. And this is a place where the rivers used to run red with blood forever. The favorite sport was war. What's happened? There's about 5 theories, but one of them, and I think for me the most important one, is that there's been a reformation of the culture of remembering history throughout Western Europe. It's been a commonization of history, so that Europeans who used to each possess their own chauvinist victim narrative about how great they were and how awful everyone else was. Now you have a commonization of history that's happened. And it was engineered. It was engineered by 2 institutions, the Eckert Institute for School Books, which was started in Germany in the late 40s by George Eckert, and by UNESCO. And then later it was picked up by a truth-telling movement in Germany, who in the 70s, it took till then, to really take charge of German school books, academic history, and public culture about German responsibility for the great horrors of the past, in which the whole German understanding of how to remember the past said, we have to teach our children. We have been, if you will, the junkyard dog of Europe. We have been the great perps of World War II and World War I and the Holocaust, the 3 great crimes. And we should not only teach it once to our kids and apologize, we should teach it forever. It's a permanent obligation. And this doesn't pervade all of Germany. It's never really reached East Germany. There's backsliding. You find neo-Nazis and all the rest in Germany. But German conduct in world affairs has been totally transformed by this. And the question, and by the way, it's very unusual. You find very few nations that have undertook. Really, nobody's ever done it like this. Other, shall we say, states with great blood on their hands. Japan continues to escape and evade, not really come to terms with their crimes. The Turks will put you in prison if you talk about the genocide of the Armenians. All the Baltic states, the Balkan states are each have their own sort of highly self-whitewashing history of their, past cruelties to each other. But the Germans sort of set the gold standard. The question we have is, well, what about applying that lesson more widely? My former PhD student, Michael Ben-Yosef Hirsch, has written a dissertation about this, a norm of truth-telling as a good thing in world politics. And she posed the question, why is that norm? It's often applied after wars. You've heard of this Truth Commission in South Africa. That's really living in that spirit, where the Truth Commissions in other African states, where the parties to the war were called upon to acknowledge what they did in a way that was healing for those they'd hurt, open and public. And Michal's observation was, religions aren't asked to do this. They're sort of given the get out of jail free card. Well, why is that? Wouldn't this help there too? And so we're trying that. We're going to create curriculum. We are creating curriculum for use in Christian education about Christian anti-Semitism. Why focus on Christian anti-Semitism today? Rabbi Lerner spoke about the huge rise in anti-Semitic incidents, violent harassment, vandalism. All those incidents rose by a factor of 5, according to the ADL's audit, between 2013 and 2022, multiplied by 5 before the October 7th massacre. Something's going on. But still, you have the question, why talk about Christians? Today, my view is the main energy behind modern American anti-Semitism is not coming from Christianity anymore. As Rabbi Lerner said, things looked benign 15 years ago. The sort of climate of Christian discourse had improved. Who knows why, how much? And it wasn't so much that Christians were admitting wrongdoing, but they just weren't talking trash quite so much. The main energy behind it today comes from the white supremacists, the neo-Nazis that we see out there marching in Charlottesville, and it comes from the campus left and the left in general, but it's focused on campus. My own opinion is that Hamas has a lot to do with that, and not recognized sufficiently. So it's not just the left. It's Hamas has played an interesting recruitment game where they've recruited the left into their cause, which is not a cause they believe in at all. Anyway, whatever. The point is, this is not Christian. So why go after the Christians? Number one, there's still some of it left. It's not gone. And number two, here's how I look at the world. When you have potentially dangerous identities and they go dormant, don't count on it to continue. There's a cycle in both aggressive national and religious identities where they will sometimes, like I said, go dormant for centuries, and then they wake up again. We've seen this with Sunni Islam, where the whole Al-Qaeda idea has reemerged after centuries of non-existence. And we've seen it with many nationalists, French Canadian nationalists, Scottish nationalists, non-nationalists, and so on have gone away, and everyone thought they're gone forever, and then they boil back. So to me, we should always fear sleeping giants. And I think Christianity is a sleeping giant. I'm not saying it's going to wake up tomorrow, but the second point is no stake has ever been driven through the heart, whatever it was, that made the Christians so much embrace and practice anti-Semitism. And just to review my own view of the history, Christianity, organized Christianity, was the wellspring of anti-Semitism through the ages and from the beginning. This is the first sort of moment, really, when they weren't the main perps. If you look at the Holocaust, Christian responsibility for that is much bigger than public discourse in the U.S. remembers. Christian church put the kindling on the forest floor that Hitler then surfed on in order to concoct the Holocaust. And it was really a project by the papacy. There's a wonderful book about this, by the way. It's called The Popes Against the Jews by David Kurtzer, who's a professor of history at Brown. So, someone puts kindling all over the forest floor, expect trouble. And that was done by the Christians. And then the Christians committed what I call the Holocaust before the Holocaust. The oppression of the Jewish people, the persecution of the Jewish people from the 11th century to the 18th century. It was a 700-year-long sort of slow motion massacre, really. If you do the demography, I've tried to figure out how many people were killed by Christian persecution in that time. And there's the demographers have not worked. Only one of them, as far as I can tell, has come up with a number, okay, which was this Joseph Jacobs many years ago in the Jewish Encyclopedia. If anyone here knows more history and can guide me to more sources on that, I'd love it. But anyway, insofar as you can figure it out, a huge chunk of the Jewish community went missing between those 700 years, and it went missing by being expelled, by being forcibly converted, and by being killed. And the exact numbers, like, we don't know. But if you just demographically ask how many people are missing, it's more than half of the Jews, more than half of the Jewish population. Had disappeared if you project how many Jews there should have been in 1750 versus how many there were. So it was an event, an immense killing episode. And Christianity basically did it. It's even easier to blame that one on the Christians. because it was so clear that this anti-Semitism was spread by the Mendicant orders, by the Franciscans and the Dominicans especially, by the papal decrees that eventually created the ghetto system and confined the Jews to limited occupations and so forth and so on, and then preached against the Jews. The church really was the fount of the famous libel, blood libel, the desecration of the wafer libel, the ritual killing libel, and these were all church engineered libels, which hurt people again and again. If you go back and look at each massacre, what was going on, these libels were a big part of it. You have the really 1,000 years of trouble, and are we in the eye of a hurricane? And I don't think we are. I mean, I'm not trembling with fear, but to me, you want to put a stake through the heart of whatever this was. And if it was the Christians doing it, you want to find a way to put the stake through the heart of their conduct. And it hasn't been done. There's been no Christian project. The closest we've come is Vatican II, which I want to give a lot of credit for. The Catholic Church did make some changes that really matter, but they're incomplete. And this was in 1962 to 65, and you probably heard about how the papacy finally forbade the teaching that the Jews killed Jesus, or abandoned the teaching that the Jewish covenant with God had been superseded by a Christian covenant. Those things were withdrawn, but there's a lot more to do. Jim Carroll, by the way, his book is good on this at the end. He says, let's have a Vatican III and finish the job. Anyway, what to do about it? What we're doing is creating a Christian curriculum on Christian anti-Semitism for use in Christian churches. And the best thing we wound up coming up with was to do a series of videos that would be usable in Christian, especially adult ed, but also maybe in confirmation and other situations where people, want to get together and share thoughts. We were kind of shocked because originally I thought, oh, this will be easy. I'll just go to the library, grab a few, highly engaging readings on this, tell people, here's a curriculum, go read it. And in fact, we could not find, shall we say, engaging, user-friendly, aimed at the common audience readings that really got the job done. Part of that, I'll just say, is that the folks who've done a lot of very valuable work on on anti-Semitism, and I'm thinking here of Facing History and Ourselves, which you've heard of, it's a Boston organization that's done really very valuable things, creating, among other things, curriculum, and also the ADL, which has helped inform people about this problem. Their philosophy in the past has been, though, to just, I don't want to accuse them of, doing the wrong thing, but they decided to pull punches on this question of Christian responsibility. They have not felt happy about framing this problem historically as a fundamentally Christian-produced badness. Okay, I do admire the summary book that was written by Goldstein, what's her first name, forgetting, on anti-Semitism. And if you read that book hard, you'll see it. It's clear who's the perp. It's the Christians. But there's been a reluctance to say it as directly as you need to say it if you want Christians to listen to it, sort of take it aboard. This was us. This is what we did, period, no escaping. Why has this not really been part of the way it's been talked about? The assumption has been, if you remember the movie Few Good Men, where Jack Nicholson says, "You can't handle the truth." And the fear has been Christians can't handle the truth, that you'll lack a hornet nest if you ask that community to address its past wrongdoings. And I think that was actually a reasonable view to take, long ago. I think those days are past, though. I think this project is feasible now. I think you could find quite a bit of Christian buy-in if you said, hey, folks, why don't you learn your history? It's an obligation. Confessing sin is part of Christian normal practice. Here's a chance to do some. You can't do it if you don't remember what sin you're confessing. So we decided to make some videos instead of written material. And we're not clear. We've already made a promo video. Are we ready to give that to people? When are we going to release it to the world? Yeah, we have a 6 or 7 minute video that sums up our project that we think is pretty good. But we still have to produce what we're going to think of as 20-minute, shall we say, springboards for discussion that would be used imagine a group where, hey, folks, let's watch this for 20 minutes and then talk about it for 40 minutes. And we would make maybe 4 to 6 of them that would deal with, focused on the Christian anti-Semitism, but also we'd have one on the Jews. You know, who are the Jews? Because let's just say Christians are deeply unfamiliar with 2 things. One is they really don't know much about the Jewish community. And second, I should have said earlier, but let me emphasize it again. One reason to do this is the Christian community knows very, very little about this story. They are essentially not, it's not part of Christian culture to ever raise the subject of Christian anti-Semitism. In fact, the main narrative that Christians believe about Christian anti-Semitism is the one that's more or less drawn from Holocaust education. And you guys were reading that. People love to hate you, love to kill you, right? Hate you. I'm forgetting. But anyway, to me, that article is a really eye-opening article. And one of the points it makes is that the Holocaust narrative that is taught in Holocaust Ed tends to downplay, just as I was saying with ADL and others do, Christian responsibility. And I would say the basic Christian narrative about the past is the big anti-Semitism story is the Holocaust, which it is. And in that story, it goes like this. A crazy German who was also a pagan, a gang of German pagans, went nuts and killed the Jews. So it was not an American, and it was not a Christian. The movement was not Christian. And then we Americans, including we Christian Americans, sent our B-24s over there and saved Private Ryan, then Patton, and we're heroes, and freed Buchenwald, as we see from the movies Ike made. And so this is a terrible event. We all agree it should never happen again, but we didn't do it, okay? And this innocence narrative is pretty much all that Christians really commonly know or understand about the history of anti-Semitism. I'm not faulting them because no one's told them that they should learn it. So our project is focused on, hey guys, we're going to help you learn now, save some of the things I just said about why you ought to learn. Let me say a final thing about what we intend in the long run. My view is if you don't institutionalize something, you haven't really changed it. Folks who want to save the world often, have a sort of fly-by-night view of how to do it. And I'm old enough to feel that we've flown by night enough. And so what we're going to try to do is institutionalize this idea of Christian understanding of Christian anti-Semitism, embed it in the long run. We haven't designed it yet, but some kind of presence in Christian liturgy, so that my view would be, why not a Sunday a year about Christian atonement for Christian persecution of the Jewish people? Why not do it on Yom Kippur? It'd be a good day for it. And it would involve, if you want religions to do things, you've got to create ritual. You've got to create hymns. You've got to create the prayers. You've got to create the activities kids will do for fun. Whole institutionalized setting that you would ask people to adopt should be created. We haven't done that yet. But the point is, our objective is to make a permanent change in the way Christians think and practice. And I'd love to hear what you think about this, because it's kind of fun, because nobody's ever done this before, and it hasn't even been thought of, really. The idea was always, go to religions and complain about them. That's the third rail. It violates the First Amendment. Just don't even think about it. And so we're wild and crazy. We're going to try to do it anyway. And we're going to talk about it after Kiddush. Who's the man?
When Lewis started, we had we couldn't have even imagined this as a project. Could we have? Could I have? Could any? No, it was, and that's what is so special about Lua, that you put together these people from Lexington who were worried about this, and people have taken off in many different directions, in several different directions. And Steve came with this project. And so it's not for Jews. It's not for us to inform this project in fundamental ways, but certainly to support it. And we're very pleased and proud that it's part of what we do.
I want to thank Steve for his courage and courageous leadership to do what you're doing. It's something that it's really hard for all faiths, traditions, people to actually, as you said, look at yourself and say, here's something I want to work on. And it's really the Christian community and under your leadership that's stepping up.